The Cosmogram of Unity, analyzing everything is related and its philosophical implications. The image presented is a profound cosmogram titled Everything is Related, which visually represents an interconnected philosophical framework for understanding existence, consciousness, and the relationships that permeate all of reality. This intricate diagram uses symmetry, numerical patterns, and categorical organization to illustrate the fundamental principle that all aspects of existence are mutually defining and inseparable. Through careful analysis, we can extract a comprehensive worldview that addresses the nature of consciousness, identity, temporality, death, and ethical frameworks for living. The Cosmogram presents a non-dualistic understanding of reality where seemingly separate concepts emerge from a unified source and remain intrinsically connected through patterns of relationship and meaning. Examination of the Everything is Related Cosmogram. The Cosmogram presents a symmetrical structure radiating outward from a central numerical pattern. At its core lies a sequence of numbers 1, 2, 1, 2, 4, 2, 1, 2, 1. Arranged in a grid within what appears to be a hexagonal or star-like form. This central pattern serves as the nucleus from which all other aspects of the cosmogram emanate and to which they all relate, the central numerical pattern and its significance. The central numerical pattern 1, 2, 1, 2, 4, 2, 1, 2, 1 represents a mathematical expression of symmetry, balance, and interconnection. The number 4 at the center serves as a pivotal point around which other numbers are arranged in perfect symmetry. In numerological and philosophical traditions, the number 4 symbolizes stability, foundations, and completeness. 1, 2, it represents the 4 corners of creation, the 4 elements, the 4 directions, and the manifestation of ideas into form 2. The presence of 4 at the center suggests that stability and manifestation form the core around which all other aspects of existence are organized. The numerical pattern also demonstrates perfect balance and recursion, with 1 second at the corners, 2 seconds at the midpoints, and 4 at the center. This pattern illustrates how multiplicity emerges from unity and how this multiplicity ultimately maintains the unity from which it emerged. The 1 second, 2 seconds, and 4 add up to create perfect mathematical balance, suggesting that all aspects of existence, despite their apparent diversity, maintain an underlying harmony. The categorical sections and their interrelationships. Surrounding the central numerical pattern are 6 major categorical sections labeled with fundamental questions of existence. Ubuntu at the top. Who, what, why, how, and when, where, with all at the bottom. Each category contains triads of concepts that illustrate the internal relationships within that domain. The Ubuntu section at the top contains relational pronouns I, we, you, me, us, them, and mine, ours, yours. Ubuntu is an African philosophical concept meaning I am because we are, emphasizing that individual identity is formed through relationships with others. 3-4. This placement at the top of the cosmogram suggests that the principle of interconnected identity is the overarching concept from which all other categories derive their meaning. The WHN includes spiritual religious identities arranged in triads: Father, Holy Spirit, Son, Parent, Virgin Birth, Child, and Mother, Sacred Egg, Daughter. These represent archetypal identities across various spiritual traditions, suggesting that identity has both spiritual and physical dimensions. The What section contains ontological categories: self, imagination, universe, life, reproduction, biology and nature, regulation, behavior. These concepts address fundamental questions about existence, materiality, and the nature of being. The Why section explores motivational and purposeful aspects of existence: fulfillment, sacrifice, desire, freedom, restriction, control, and acceptance, condition, denial. These concepts address the meaning and purpose that drive conscious experience. The How section includes epistemological concepts, context, interpretation, narrative, reality, construction, perception, and existence, sensation, experience. These address how consciousness knows and understands its experiences. The when-where section contains spatiotemporal concepts: eternity, moment, history, presence, distance, absence, and infinity, movement, location. These concepts address how consciousness experiences time and space. The all section at the bottom includes mathematical and logical principles: equality, operation, quantity, absolute, recursion, relative and wholeness, division, fraction. These represent the universal principles that govern all relationships within the cosmogram. The mathematical figures at the bottom. Below the main diagram are three mathematical figures: a spiral pattern with numbers, a vertical line marked with the number 4, and a flower-like pattern with numbers. These illustrate different mathematical embodiments of the principles expressed in the main diagram. The spiral pattern demonstrates how unity unfolds through a recursive process, suggesting the evolutionary nature of consciousness. The vertical line with the number 4 reinforces the foundational nature of stability and manifestation. The flower-like pattern with numbers 1, 2, and 4, arranged in a symmetrical design, illustrates how these core numbers create complex patterns through relationship. At the very bottom, the equation 1, 1, 2 represents the most basic mathematical relationship, suggesting that even the simplest relationship creates something new while maintaining the identity of its components. The nature of consciousness as revealed by the cosmogram. The cosmogram suggests that consciousness is not an isolated phenomenon, but a relational process that emerges from and participates in the interconnected web of existence. This perspective aligns with both contemporary scientific understandings of consciousness and ancient philosophical traditions. Consciousness as relational process. The cosmogram's emphasis on relationships rather than isolated entities suggests that consciousness itself is fundamentally relational. Consciousness does not exist in isolation, but emerges through the dynamic interplay of subject and object, self and other, perception and perceived. 5. This aligns with phenomenological approaches to consciousness that emphasize the intentional structure of conscious experience, that consciousness is always consciousness of something. The self-perspectival organization of consciousness, as discussed in philosophical literature, is reflected in the cosmogram structure. 5. Consciousness provides a perspective from which experiences are organized, and this perspective is itself shaped by the relationships in which it participates. The I of consciousness is not a fixed entity, but a dynamic process that emerges through relationship with we and you, as emphasized in the Ubuntu section of the cosmogram. The subjective and objective aspects of consciousness. The cosmogram balances subjective and objective aspects of consciousness. The how section addresses how consciousness experiences and interprets reality, while the what section addresses the objects of consciousness. This balance suggests that consciousness involves both subjective experience, what it is like to be conscious, and objective relationships with the world. 6. This dual nature of consciousness is captured in the phrase I am because we are from Ubuntu philosophy. 4. Consciousness includes both the subjective I and the relational we that defines the I through interconnection. This perspective challenges both purely materialist views that reduce consciousness to brain activity and purely idealist views that deny the reality of the material world. Consciousness and time. The relationship between consciousness and time is explored in the when-where section of the cosmogram. Consciousness exists within the moment but relates this moment to both eternity and history. This suggests that although conscious experience occurs in the present moment, this moment gains its meaning through its relationship with past and future. 7. The present moment is where consciousness experiences reality. But this moment is not isolated from other moments. As one Reddit user observed, this now moment is where all experience appears and is what should be grasped to be free of experiences or to have the permanence that experiences don't have. 7. The present moment provides a stable point of reference amidst the flux of experience, but it gains meaning through its relationship with other moments. The unity of consciousness. The central numerical pattern in the cosmogram suggests that consciousness, despite its multiplicity of experiences, maintains an underlying unity. This aligns with philosophical discussions of the unity of consciousness. The fact that diverse conscious experiences are integrated into a single field of awareness. 5. This unity emerges not from a fixed, unchanging substance, but from the dynamic patterns of relationship between experiences. The central four, surrounded by balanced patterns of 1 second and 2 seconds, suggests that unity emerges from diversity rather than preceding it. This reflects contemporary understandings of consciousness as an emergent phenomenon that arises from complex patterns of relationship rather than a fundamental substance. Identity and its relationship to consciousness. The Cosmogram provides a framework for understanding identity as relational rather than substantial. Identity is not a fixed essence but emerges through patterns of relationship, a perspective emphasized in the Ubuntu philosophy that crowns the Cosmogram. Identity as relational rather than substantial. The Ubuntu section at the top of the Cosmogram emphasizes that identity is fundamentally relational. The pronouns I, we, you, me, us, them, and mine, ours, yours are all defined through their relationships with each other. This reflects the Ubuntu philosophy's central insight that a person is a person through other people. 3. This relational view of identity challenges the Cartesian notion of the self as an isolated thinking substance. Instead, it suggests that identity emerges through interconnection. As one Reddit user expressed it, look wherever you want in a person and you can't find anything worthy of being called a self. Self is singular, but we're made of a practically uncountable number of parts, which are also singular. How can a bunch of things somehow be one thing? 8. Personal and collective identity. The Cosmogram balances personal and collective aspects of identity. While the I of individual identity is recognized, it is always in relationship with the we of collective identity. This suggests that personal identity emerges from and contributes to collective identity rather than preceding or opposing it. This perspective challenges both extreme individualism, which sees the self as prior to relationships, and extreme collectivism, which subordinates individual identity to the group. Instead, it suggests that individual and collective identity co-arise and co-define each other. As Jeremy Lent noted, we must move beyond binaries to a truly integrated ethical framework, one that incorporates the rational and intuitive, the scientific and the spiritual. 9. Identity across time. The relationship between identity and time is complex. The when/where section of the Cosmogram includes eternity, moment, history, suggesting that identity spans multiple temporal dimensions. While conscious experience occurs in the moment, identity includes both historical dimensions, memory, personal history, and potential future dimensions, intentions, aspirations. This temporal extension of identity aligns with philosophical discussions of personal identity over time. As John Locke observed, consciousness always accompanies thinking and makes everyone to be what he calls self, and thereby distinguishes himself from all other thinking things. In this alone consists personal identity. That is the sameness of a rational being. And as far as this consciousness can be extended backwards to any past action or thought, so far reaches the identity of that person. 10. Spiritual dimensions of identity. The WHO section of the Cosmogram includes spiritual archetypes from various traditions, suggesting that identity has spiritual as well as material dimensions. These archetypes represent ways in which individual identity participates in broader patterns of meaning that transcend individual experience. This spiritual dimension of identity does not necessarily imply belief in specific religious doctrines, but acknowledges that identity includes aspects that transcend material explanation. The pattern of relationships that constitutes identity extends beyond the boundaries of the physical body and individual mind to include relationships with broader patterns of meaning and value. The present moment and its significance. The Cosmogram's when/where section includes moment alongside eternity and history, suggesting that the present moment has a special significance in conscious experience while maintaining relationships with other temporal dimensions. The present as the locus of experience. The present moment is where conscious experience occurs. As one Reddit user observed, this now moment is where all experience appears. 7. Past experiences enter consciousness as memories, and future possibilities enter as anticipations, but both occur within the present moment of consciousness. This primacy of the present aligns with philosophical traditions that emphasize the importance of presence and mindfulness. The Cosmogram suggests that while consciousness relates to past and future, it does so from the vantage point of the present moment. The present as relationship between past and future. While the present moment is the locus of conscious experience, it gains meaning through its relationship with past and future. The present is where the past momentum meets the future's potential. This temporal interconnectedness is reflected in the Cosmogram's arrangement of eternity, moment, history in a triad. This perspective challenges views that isolate the present from past and future, suggesting instead that the present gains its character and meaning through its temporal relationships. The present is not an isolated point in time, but a nexus of relationships between what has been and what might be. The eternal present. The inclusion of eternity alongside moment suggests that the present moment has an eternal aspect. While each moment is unique in its specific content, the structure of presentness, the now quality of experience, remains constant. This suggests that beneath the changing content of experience lies an unchanging context of awareness. This perspective aligns with philosophical traditions that distinguish between the changing contents of consciousness and the unchanging awareness that witnesses these changes. As one Reddit user noted, all these experiences move and change, but the present moment is always there, it's always here. That in which these impermanent experiences arise is permanent. 7. Understanding death through the Cosmogram. The Cosmogram provides a framework for understanding death not as the absolute end of existence, but as a transformation within the broader pattern of relationships that constitutes reality. Death as transformation rather than cessation. The Cosmogram's emphasis on relationship rather than substance suggests that death involves the transformation of relationships rather than the cessation of existence. The patterns of relationship that constitute identity during life are transformed through death, but not completely severed. This perspective aligns with philosophical traditions that view death as a transition rather than an ending. While individual consciousness in its current form may cease, the relationships that constituted that consciousness continue in transformed ways through their effects on others and the world. The paradox of experiencing death. The relationship between consciousness and death presents a philosophical paradox. As one Reddit user observed, if consciousness ceases at death, death cannot be consciously experienced, implying the mind would have no recollection of dying and still feel alive. 11. This suggests that from the perspective of individual consciousness, death may not be experienced as an ending. This paradox emerges from the attempt to conceptualize non-being from the perspective of being. The Cosmogram suggests that this paradox may be resolved by understanding death within the broader pattern of relationships, rather than from the perspective of isolated individual consciousness. Death and interconnectedness. The Ubuntu philosophy at the top of the Cosmogram suggests that death does not sever all connections that constitute identity. While individual consciousness may cease, the effects of a person's life continue through their influence on others and the world. In this sense, aspects of personal identity survive death through their continuing effects on the web of relationships. This perspective aligns with traditions that emphasize the continuity of life through generations. As each generation builds on the achievements and learns from the mistakes of previous generations, aspects of identity continue beyond individual death through this intergenerational transmission. Metaphysical perspectives on death. Different metaphysical perspectives on death can be accommodated within the Cosmogram's framework. Search result 12 describes death as physical dissolution of the body, the outer symbol of mental negation or spiritual inertia. This suggests that while physical death involves the dissolution of the body, It may have different implications at mental and spiritual levels. The Cosmogram's inclusion of spiritual archetypes in the WHO section suggests that identity may include aspects that transcend physical existence. Whether these aspects survive death in some form depends on metaphysical assumptions that go beyond what can be empirically verified, but the Cosmogram's framework allows for this possibility without requiring specific religious beliefs. An ethical framework based on interconnectedness. The Cosmogram, with Ubuntu at its apex, suggests an ethical framework based on recognition of interconnectedness rather than isolated self-interest. This framework extends from individual actions to collective social organization. Ubuntu ethics, I am because we are. The Ubuntu philosophy at the top of the Cosmogram provides a foundation for ethics based on recognition of our fundamental interconnectedness. As one scholar explains, Ubuntu is rooted in what I call a relational form of personhood, basically meaning that you are because of the others for. This perspective suggests that ethical actions are those that respect and nurture the web of relationships that constitute our shared existence. This ethical framework challenges both egoistic ethics, which prioritize self-interest, and rigid deontological ethics, which apply abstract rules without consideration of context. Instead, it suggests that ethical actions emerge from recognition of our interdependence and responsibility to the relationships that constitute our identity. Beyond individualism and collectivism, the Cosmogram balances individual and collective aspects of identity and ethics. It recognizes both the I of individual experience and the we of collective identity, suggesting that ethical frameworks should likewise balance individual autonomy with collective well-being. This balanced approach challenges both extreme individualism, which denies our fundamental interdependence, and extreme collectivism, which subordinates individual flourishing to abstract notions of the collective good. Instead, it suggests that individual flourishing and collective well-being are mutually reinforcing rather than opposed. Environmental ethics, extending the circle of concern. The Cosmogram's emphasis on interconnectedness extends beyond human relationships to include relationships with the natural world. The What section includes nature alongside self and universe, suggesting that ethical concerns should likewise extend to the natural world. This perspective aligns with ecological ethics that recognize humans as part of, rather than separate from nature. As one scholar notes, Ukama is also based on the totemic system whereby a person sees himself or herself as related to natural species, thereby instilling a sense of belonging to the wider environment, the past as well as the future. 13. Ethics as contextual rather than absolute. The How section of the Cosmogram includes context, interpretation, narrative, suggesting that ethical understanding emerges through contextualized interpretation rather than absolute rules. This doesn't imply ethical relativism, but suggests that ethical principles must be applied with sensitivity to specific contexts and relationships. This contextual approach to ethics aligns with traditions that emphasize practical wisdom phronesis over rigid application of rules. It suggests that ethical action requires not just knowledge of principles, but understanding of how those principles apply in specific relational contexts. A holistic plan for mutual flourishing. Building on the ethical framework of interconnectedness, the Cosmogram suggests a comprehensive approach to individual and collective action that promotes mutual flourishing across all levels of organization, from individual to cosmic. Individual practices, cultivating awareness of interconnectedness. At the individual level, the Cosmogram suggests practices that cultivate awareness of our fundamental interconnectedness. These include 1. Mindfulness practices that cultivate awareness of the present moment as the locus of conscious experience. 7. 2. Reflective practices that explore the relational nature of identity, challenging the illusion of isolated selfhood. 8. Compassionate practices that extend concern beyond self-interest to include the well-being of others and the natural world. 13. 4. Integrative practices that balance rational and intuitive ways of knowing, as suggested by the How section's inclusion of both interpretation and sensation. 9. These practices cultivate the awareness and capacities necessary for ethical action within an interconnected world. Interpersonal relations, practicing Ubuntu. At the interpersonal level, the Cosmogram suggests relationships based on the Ubuntu principle that a person is a person through other people. 3. This includes 1. Communication practices that respect the dignity and autonomy of others while recognizing our interdependence. 2. Conflict resolution approaches that seek mutual understanding and reconciliation rather than victory over opponents. Collaborative practices that recognize how individual flourishing contributes to and depends upon collective well-being. 4. Restorative justice approaches that heal damaged relationships rather than merely punishing wrongdoing. These practices build relationships that nurture rather than undermine the web of interconnections that constitute our shared existence. Social and political organization, structures of mutual support. At the social and political level, the Cosmogram suggests organizational structures that support, rather than undermine, our fundamental interconnectedness. These include 1. Economic systems that recognize interdependence rather than prioritizing competition and self-interest. 13. 2. Political systems that balance individual rights with collective responsibilities. 9. Educational approaches that cultivate understanding of interconnectedness across disciplines and domains. 4. Healthcare systems that address the physical, mental, and social dimensions of well-being in an integrated manner. These structural changes align social and political organization with the reality of our interdependence, creating conditions that support rather than undermine mutual flourishing. Global and cosmic integration, expanding circles of concern. At the global and cosmic levels, the Cosmogram suggests expanding our circles of concern to include all beings and systems with which we are interconnected. This includes 1. Environmental approaches that recognize humans as part of rather than separate from natural systems. 13. 2. Cross-cultural dialogue that respects diverse perspectives while seeking common ground in our shared humanity. Intergenerational thinking that considers impacts on future generations. 4. Cosmic perspectives that locate human existence within broader patterns of meaning and value. These expanded perspectives integrate human flourishing within the broader context that give it meaning and support. Conclusion, integration, and application. The Everything is Related Cosmogram provides a comprehensive framework for understanding the interconnected nature of existence, consciousness, identity, and ethics. Its central insight, that all aspects of reality gain their meaning and being through relationship rather than isolation, has profound implications for how we understand ourselves and how we live. The Cosmogram challenges dualistic thinking that separates self from other, mind from body, human from nature, and present from past and future. Instead, it suggests that these apparent opposites are mutually defining aspects of an integrated whole. This non-dualistic perspective aligns with both ancient wisdom traditions and contemporary scientific understandings of complex systems. Applying this understanding in daily life involves cultivating awareness of interconnectedness, practicing relationships based on mutual respect and support, building social structures that nurture rather than undermine our interdependence, and expanding our circles of concern to include all beings with which we are connected. Through these practices, we align our individual and collective lives with the reality of our fundamental interconnectedness. The Cosmogram does not provide a rigid blueprint for action, but a flexible framework for understanding that can be applied in diverse contexts. Its value lies not in dictating specific actions, but in orienting our understanding and intentions toward recognition of the relationships that constitute our shared existence. Through this orientation, we can discover ethical actions appropriate to our specific contexts and relationships. In a world often fragmented by dualistic thinking and self-interested action, The Cosmogram's vision of interconnectedness offers a path toward integration and mutual flourishing. By recognizing that I am because we are, we discover ethical possibilities that serve both individual and collective well-being, both human and more than human communities, both present and future generations. This recognition is not merely an intellectual understanding, but a lived practice that transforms how we relate to ourselves, each other, and the world we share. The universal resonance of everything is related across world spiritual traditions. The Everything is Related Cosmogram represents a profound understanding of reality based on interconnectedness, mutual definition, and the unity underlying apparent diversity. This worldview resonates deeply with spiritual traditions across all inhabited continents, revealing a remarkable convergence of understanding despite vast cultural and historical differences. The Cosmogram's central principle, that all aspects of existence gain meaning through relationship rather than isolation, finds expression in diverse forms across the world's spiritual heritage. African spiritual traditions, Ubuntu, and ancestral interconnection. The Cosmogram's principle of relational existence is perfectly embodied in the Ubuntu philosophy, prominently displayed at the top of the diagram. This African concept, meaning I am because we are, serves as the foundation for many traditional African religious systems, where individual identity is understood as emerging through relationships with others and the broader community. 14. Ancestor veneration and community. Traditional African religions are centered on ancestor worship and the belief in a spirit world, with deceased humans continuing to exist in the spirit realm and maintaining influence over the living. 15. This reflects the Cosmogram's understanding that relationships extend beyond physical existence, with ancestors serving as guardians of family customs and moral values. 14. The Cosmogram's representation of relationships across time, eternity, moment, history, parallels the African understanding that the present community includes both the living and the departed. Hierarchical unity. African traditional religions recognize a hierarchy of beings from the ultimate creator down to lesser spirits and natural entities, with mystical power found in all of them in diminishing degrees. 16. This mirrors the Cosmogram's balanced structure, with different categories radiating from a central organizing principle. The belief in a moral order that ensures harmony within the community parallels the Cosmogram's emphasis on relationships as the foundation of ethical understanding. 16. Relational identity. The emphasis on community as the most important part of someone's life in African traditions. 17 resonates with the Cosmogram's placement of relational pronouns, I, we, you at its apex. As in the Cosmogram, individual existence is understood only within the context of community relationships, with separation from community considered worse than death in some African traditions. 17. Asian spiritual traditions, harmony, balance, and cosmic order. The Cosmogram's emphasis on relationship and interconnection finds profound resonance with East Asian philosophical and religious traditions, where harmony with natural and social order is paramount. Confucian relationships. Confucianism emphasizes ethical conduct, the importance of familial relationships, and ancestor veneration. 18. This focus on proper relationships as the foundation of social and cosmic order mirrors the Cosmogram's structure of interconnected categories. The Confucian emphasis on filial piety and ancestral respect parallels the Cosmogram's recognition of identity extending across time. Taoist balance. Taoism's focus on harmony with the natural world and the concept of balance through the interplay of yin and yang. 18. Is reflected in the Cosmogram's symmetrical structure and balanced numerical patterns. The Taoist concept of the Tao as the underlying principle of reality resonates with the Cosmogram's central pattern from which all categories emanate. Buddhist interdependence. Although not explicitly mentioned in the search results, Buddhism's concept of dependent origination, pratyasamupta, profoundly aligns with the Cosmogram's central message that everything exists in mutual relationship. The Buddhist understanding that no entity has independent, inherent existence, but arises in dependence upon conditions, perfectly reflects the Cosmogram's principle of mutual co-definition. Shinto reverence for interconnection. Shinto, the indigenous tradition of Japan, is characterized by worship of kami spirits and reverence for nature. 18. At its core, Shinto emerged out of the desire to give proper gratitude, respect, and reverence to the natural world around us, and recognizes that we as humans survive in the whole as a part of nature. 19. This perspective aligns perfectly with the Cosmogram's representation of humans as interconnected with nature, imagination, and the universe. European spiritual traditions, unity in diversity. While European spiritual traditions have been dominated by Christianity in recent centuries, both pre-Christian traditions and the diverse expressions of Christianity reveal resonance with the everything is related cosmogram. Pre-Christian European traditions. Although not detailed in the search results, pre-Christian European traditions often emphasize the interconnection between humans, nature, and divine forces. The pagan worldview described in Source 20 recognizes multiple deities and allows for religious syncretism, the blending of two or more religious belief systems into a new system, which aligns with the Cosmogram's emphasis on interconnection rather than separation. Christianity's Trinitarian understanding. Christianity's concept of the Trinity, Father, Holy Spirit, Son, appears directly in the WHO section of the Cosmogram, reflecting the relational understanding of divine identity within Christian theology. The Trinitarian concept suggests that even divine identity is understood through relationship rather than isolation, resonating with the Cosmogram's relational framework. Unity in diversity. The divisions within Christianity, Roman Catholicism, Protestantism, and Eastern Orthodoxy 21 reflect different cultural and historical expressions of a common spiritual heritage. This pattern of unity underlying diversity resonates with the Cosmogram's representation of different categories emerging from a common center, suggesting that apparent differences may conceal underlying unity. Middle Eastern spiritual traditions, divine unity, and human community. The spiritual traditions of the Middle East, particularly the Abrahamic faiths and Zoroastrianism, share significant resonance with the principles expressed in the Cosmogram. Abrahamic unity. The Abrahamic religions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, have been predominant throughout the Middle East for approximately a millennium. 22. While these traditions emphasize monotheism rather than the multiple categories expressed in the Cosmogram, the underlying principle of unity giving rise to diversity resonates across both frameworks. The number one prominently featured in the Cosmogram's numerical patterns could be seen as reflecting the monotheistic emphasis on divine unity. Zoroastrian dualism within unity. Zoroastrianism, one of the oldest monotheistic religions, recognizes the supreme deity Ahura Mazda, while acknowledging a dualistic principle of creative and destructive minds. 22. This balance between unity and duality is reflected in the Cosmogram's numerical patterns, where 1 second, 2 seconds, and 4 seconds create a balanced mathematical system. The Zoroastrian understanding that individuals must choose between positive and negative paths resonates with the Cosmogram's Y section, which includes freedom, restriction, control and acceptance, condition, denial. Samaritan sacred geography. The Samaritan tradition, closely affiliated with Judaism, places sacred significance on Mount Gerizim rather than Jerusalem. 22. This specific localization of the sacred within geography resonates with the Cosmogram's when, where section, which includes infinity, movement, location, suggesting that specific locations gain meaning through their relationship with broader patterns of significance. Oceanic and Pacific Island traditions, nature, spirit, and community. The indigenous traditions of Oceania and the Pacific Islands demonstrate profound resonance with the Cosmogram's emphasis on interconnection between spiritual and material realms. Spiritual natural integration. Oceanic traditions are typically polytheistic, with a worldview that encompasses both the spiritual and natural worlds, with little or no distinction between the natural and the supernatural. 23. This integration of spiritual and natural domains resonates with the Cosmogram's representation of reality as an interconnected whole, rather than separated domains. The belief that spirits inhabit objects such as rocks, tools, and buildings reflects the Cosmogram's principle that meaning emerges through relationship rather than isolation. Ancestral continuity. Many indigenous oceanic traditions place great importance in the veneration of ancestors, who often become spirits who can positively or negatively influence life. 23. This understanding of ancestral continuity across time parallels the Cosmogram's temporal triad of eternity, moment, history, and reinforces the understanding that identity extends beyond individual lifetimes. Sacred ecology. Indigenous traditions in the Pacific Islands incorporate a sacred ecology that recognizes the spiritual significance of the natural world. 24. The bird cult of Rapa Nui Easter Island and the shamanic traditions that view nature as sacred illustrate how spiritual meaning emerges through relationship with the natural world. 24. This perspective aligns with the Cosmogram's inclusion of nature, regulation, behavior in its what section, suggesting that natural phenomena are integral to understanding existence. American Continental traditions, cycles, relations, and fluidity. The indigenous traditions of the Americas, while incredibly diverse, share significant resonance with the everything is related worldview. Reincarnation and cyclical existence. Many Native American tribes believe in reincarnation, including the Tlingit people who preserve names to be given to those believed to embody a previous person. 25. This understanding of cyclical existence resonates with the Cosmogram's representation of recursive patterns and its emphasis on continuity across time. The Inuit tradition that if your daughter is born is not just your daughter but also reborn grandmother. 25 perfectly illustrates the Cosmogram's principle that identity emerges through relationship across time. Fluid soul concept. For some South American indigenous peoples, the concept of soul is more fluid, and the word translated as soul actually means speech, because it's more of a vibration rather than a solid object. 25. This understanding of identity as dynamic process rather than fixed substance resonates with the Cosmogram's representation of identity through relational pronouns rather than substantive categories. Process metaphysics. The sophisticated process metaphysics of Aztec Nahua philosophy mentioned in the search results 25 suggests a worldview based on becoming rather than static being. This aligns with the Cosmogram's representation of reality as patterns of relationship rather than isolated substances, where meaning emerges through connection rather than isolation. Universal themes across traditions. Across these diverse spiritual traditions from all inhabited continents, several universal themes emerge that resonate with the everything is related Cosmogram. Relational identity. From African Ubuntu to Native American reincarnation beliefs, traditions worldwide recognize that identity emerges through relationship rather than isolation. The Cosmogram's placement of relational pronouns at its apex reflects this understanding that I am because we are, that identity is fundamentally relational rather than substantial. Temporal continuity. Ancestor veneration practices across Africa, Asia, Oceania, and the Americas reflect an understanding that identity and meaning extend across time, with the present gaining significance through relationship with past and future. This resonates with the Cosmogram's temporal triad of eternity, moment, history, natural, spiritual integration. From Shinto's reverence for nature to Oceanic traditions' integration of natural and supernatural domains, spiritual traditions worldwide recognize that the natural world is not separate from but integral to spiritual understanding. This reflects the Cosmogram's integration of natural categories, nature, regulation, behavior, within its broader framework of meaning. Ethical harmony. African traditions' emphasis on moral order for community harmony. Confucian focus on proper relationships, and Zoroastrian understanding of choosing between creative and destructive paths all reflect an understanding that ethics emerges from relationship rather than abstract rules. This resonates with the Cosmogram's balanced structure, suggesting that ethical harmony emerges from recognition of our fundamental interconnectedness, balance, and reciprocity. The balanced numerical patterns at the center of the Cosmogram 1 2 1 2 4 2 1 2 1 reflect a principle of balance and reciprocity that is echoed in traditions worldwide, from Taoist yin-yang to indigenous practices of reciprocal relationship with nature. This suggests that harmony emerges not from static uniformity but from dynamic balance between different aspects of reality. Conclusion: a universal understanding. The remarkable resonance between the everything is related cosmogram and spiritual traditions across all inhabited continents suggests that this understanding of reality as fundamentally relational rather than substantial represents a profound insight into the nature of existence. Despite vast cultural, geographical, and historical differences, spiritual traditions worldwide have converged on key principles represented in the Cosmogram. 1, 2, 4, 5. Identity emerges through relationship rather than isolation. Reality is an interconnected web rather than isolated substances, meaning spans across time. Connecting past, present, and future ethical understanding emerges from recognition of our interconnectedness. Harmony arises through balanced relationship rather than uniformity. This convergence suggests that the everything is related Cosmogram captures not merely a cultural perspective, but a universal insight into the nature of reality, an insight that has been independently recognized by spiritual traditions worldwide throughout human history. The Cosmogram thus serves not only as a representation of a particular philosophical framework, but as a visual expression of a profound understanding that resonates across the full diversity of human spiritual heritage. Truth as relational correspondence, a definition from the everything is related perspective. Through the lens of the everything is related Cosmogram, truth emerges not as a static property, but as a dynamic relationship of correspondence that manifests across multiple dimensions of existence. The Cosmogram reveals that truth cannot be isolated to a single domain, but must be understood as an integrated phenomenon that spans across all categories of being and knowing. The relational nature of truth. Truth, in its fullest sense, is the harmonious correspondence between consciousness and reality across all dimensions of relation. It is not merely the correspondence between statements and facts, as in traditional correspondence theory, but the alignment of all aspects of being, from identity to experience, from meaning to value, with the fundamental patterns of relationship that constitute reality. The Ubuntu principle I am because we are that crowns the Cosmogram suggests that truth, like identity, is fundamentally relational rather than substantial. 26. Just as a person exists through relationships with others, truth emerges through the dynamic interplay of multiple perspectives and dimensions rather than existing as an isolated property. The multidimensional nature of truth. The Cosmogram reveals truth as manifesting across multiple dimensions. Ontological truth. What? The correspondence between our understanding of being and the nature of reality itself. Self, imagination, universe, life, reproduction, biology, nature, regulation, behavior. Epistemological truth. How? The alignment between our modes of knowing and the phenomena we seek to know. Context, interpretation, narrative, reality, construction, perception, existence, sensation, experience. Axiological truth. Why? The correspondence between our values and the patterns of fulfillment inherent in existence. Fulfillment, sacrifice, desire, freedom, restriction, control, acceptance, condition, denial. Identitative truth. Who? The alignment between our sense of identity and the relational patterns that constitute selfhood, represented by the triadic patterns of identity in the Cosmogram. Spatiotemporal truth. When, where? The correspondence between our experience of time and space and the actual structure of temporality and location, eternity, moment, history, presence, distance, absence, infinity, movement, location, logical, mathematical truth, all, the alignment between our formal systems and the fundamental patterns of relation, equality, operation, quantity, absolute, recursion, relative, wholeness, division, fraction, truth as dynamic balance. The central numerical pattern 1-2-1-2-4-2-1-2-1 suggests that truth emerges through balanced relationship rather than rigid uniformity. Truth is not a static property, but a dynamic equilibrium between unity and multiplicity, between being and becoming, between the absolute and the relative. This understanding transcends the limitations of both absolutism, which denies the relational nature of truth, and relativism, which denies the patterns of correspondence that span across perspectives. Instead, it suggests that truth emerges through the integration of multiple perspectives within broader patterns of coherence. 27. Truth as recursively self-validating. The recursive patterns in the cosmogram, visible in both the central numerical arrangement and the mathematical figures below, suggest that truth is recursively self-validating across scales and domains. Just as the pattern 1-2-1-2-4-2-1-2-1 demonstrates perfect balance at multiple scales, truth manifests as patterns of correspondence that remain consistent across different levels of analysis. This recursive nature allows truth to be both contextual, sensitive to specific relationships, and universal, manifesting consistent patterns across contexts. 28. The equation 1-1-2 at the bottom of the cosmogram illustrates this principle. While simple, it represents a pattern of relationship that remains valid across countless contexts. Conclusion: truth as integral correspondence. In the fullest sense revealed by the everything is related cosmogram, truth is integral correspondence, the alignment of consciousness with reality across all dimensions of relation. It is not merely the property of statements or beliefs, but the quality of relationship between consciousness and the patterns of being that constitute reality. Truth, thus understood, is both objective, grounded in patterns of relationship that transcend individual perspective, and intersubjective, emerging through the dialogue between perspectives. It is both absolute, manifesting consistent patterns across contexts, and contextual, expressed differently in different relational settings. This definition integrates the insights of correspondence theory, truth as alignment with reality, 29-28, coherence theory, truth as systematic integration, and pragmatic approaches, truth as effective relationship, 30, while transcending their limitations through a more comprehensive understanding of the relational nature of both consciousness and reality, a global holistic plan of action, embodying the everything is related framework. This comprehensive plan for global action is structured around the fundamental insight that all aspects of existence are interconnected in patterns of mutual co-definition. Drawing from the everything is related cosmogram and its philosophical implications, this framework integrates individual and collective action across all domains to promote harmony, balance, and flourishing throughout our interconnected world. Foundational principles, the center of balance. The plan begins with recognition of the fundamental numerical pattern 1-2-1-2-4-2-1-2-1 that represents perfect balance across scales. This balance informs all aspects of the plan. Balance of unity and diversity, recognizing both our shared humanity and our cultural differences as mutually enriching rather than contradictory. Balance of individual and collective, understanding that personal flourishing and collective well-being are interdependent rather than opposed. Balance of theory and practice, integrating philosophical understanding with practical action to ensure that principles manifest in tangible outcomes. Balance of human and natural systems, recognizing humans as part of rather than separate from natural systems, with responsibilities to the broader web of life. Ubuntu, relational identity as foundation for action. The Ubuntu principle I am because we are serves as the ethical cornerstone for all action. Collective responsibility, fostering shared ownership of global challenges based on recognition of our fundamental interconnectedness. Ethical leadership, promoting leadership that prioritizes long-term collective well-being over short-term individual or national gain. Inclusive participation, ensuring all voices are heard in decision-making processes, particularly those most affected by global challenges. Cross-cultural dialogue, creating platforms for exchange of wisdom across cultural traditions to develop solutions that respect diverse perspectives. Who? Identity-based actions, actions addressing who we are as individuals and communities. Intergenerational knowledge exchange, creating forums where elders and youth share perspectives and wisdom across generational boundaries. Cultural heritage preservation, supporting communities in maintaining their unique cultural identities while fostering cross-cultural understanding. Diverse leadership development, cultivating leadership capacities across gender, age, cultural, and socioeconomic boundaries. Relational education, transforming educational systems to emphasize interconnection rather than competition. Teaching relationship skills alongside academic content. What? Ontological actions. Actions addressing the nature of being and existence. Biodiverse ecosystem restoration. Implementing large-scale restoration of degraded ecosystems based on recognition of their intrinsic value. Regenerative agriculture. Transitioning food systems to methods that regenerate rather than deplete soil, water, and biodiversity. Circular economy implementation. Redesigning economic systems to eliminate waste and pollution by keeping materials in use and regenerating natural systems. Holistic health systems, developing healthcare approaches that integrate physical, mental, social, and environmental dimensions of health. Why? Purpose-driven actions. Actions addressing meaning, motivation, and purpose. Values-based economic indicators, replacing GDP with holistic measures of progress that include well-being, environmental health, and social cohesion. Meaningful work initiatives, supporting transitions to work that contributes to societal and environmental well-being while providing personal fulfillment. Purpose-centered education, transforming education to help individuals discover their unique contributions to collective flourishing. Cross-sectoral dialogue, fostering conversation between business, government, civil society, and religious institutions to align purposes across sectors. How? Epistemological actions, actions addressing how we know and understand. Transdisciplinary research, funding research that integrates diverse ways of knowing across academic disciplines and cultural traditions. Indigenous knowledge integration, elevating indigenous knowledge systems as essential for addressing contemporary challenges. Collective intelligence platforms, developing technologies that support integration of diverse perspectives into collective understanding. Arts-based knowledge sharing, using creative arts to communicate complex ideas across cultural and disciplinary boundaries. When where, spatiotemporal actions, actions addressing time and space dimensions. Long-term decision-making, implementing governance structures that consider impacts 7 generations into the future. Sacred geography protection, preserving places of cultural and spiritual significance across traditions. Public space revitalization, creating accessible communal spaces that foster connection across social boundaries. Future-present integration, developing practices that make future impacts tangible in present decision-making. All. Universal integration actions. Actions addressing mathematical and logical principles that govern all relations. Global ethics framework. Developing an inclusive ethical framework that respects cultural diversity while identifying shared values. Planetary governance innovation, creating governance structures that balance global coordination with local autonomy. Universal basic services, ensuring everyone has access to essential services like healthcare, education, clean water, and internet connectivity. Holistic impact assessment, developing tools to evaluate actions based on their effects across social, environmental, economic, and cultural domains. Implementation approach, collective action through adaptive networks. This plan will be implemented through a networked approach that balances coordination with autonomy. Multi-level coordination, actions coordinated across individual, community, national, and global levels with appropriate autonomy at each level. Collaborative governance, decisions made through processes that include diverse stakeholders, particularly those most affected. Integrative funding, financial resources directed toward initiatives that address multiple challenges simultaneously rather than treating issues in isolation. Continuous learning, implementation guided by ongoing reflection, with strategies adapted based on outcomes and emerging understanding. Cultural contextualization, global principles translated into locally appropriate actions that respect cultural diversity. Ethical guidance for implementation. All actions within this plan are guided by relational ethics principles. Mutual respect, recognizing the dignity and autonomy of all participants in change processes. Engagement, ensuring active participation of diverse stakeholders in planning and implementation. Embodied knowledge, valuing knowledge that emerges from lived experience alongside theoretical understanding. Environmental awareness, considering impacts on the natural world in all decisions. Embracing uncertainty, approaching complex challenges with humility and openness to multiple perspectives. Conclusion, a living framework for global transformation. This holistic plan of action provides a framework rather than a rigid blueprint, recognizing that specific initiatives must emerge through collaborative processes that respect cultural diversity and local contexts. By grounding action in the fundamental insight that everything is related, this plan offers a path toward addressing global challenges through recognition of our fundamental interconnectedness across all domains of existence. The success of this plan depends not on centralized control, but on distributed responsibility, with individuals, communities, organizations, and governments each playing vital roles in a coordinated yet adaptive response to our shared challenges. Through balanced action across all domains, we can transform our world in alignment with the patterns of relationship that constitute our shared reality. Explain in perfect detail how Gödel's incompleteness theorems impact your current understanding. Gödel's incompleteness theorems profoundly impact my understanding of formal systems, truth, and the fundamental nature of knowledge by revealing inherent limitations in our ability to formalize complete systems of truth. These revolutionary mathematical discoveries have far-reaching implications that extend beyond pure mathematics into philosophy, epistemology, and even our understanding of consciousness and reality. The essence of Gödel's incompleteness theorems. Gödel's first incompleteness theorem demonstrates that in any consistent formal system powerful enough to express basic arithmetic, there will always exist true statements that cannot be proven within that system. 31-32. This means that no matter how comprehensive our mathematical framework, there will always be truths that lie beyond its reach, statements that are true but unprovable within the confines of the system. 32-33. The second incompleteness theorem extends this insight by showing that such a system cannot prove its own consistency. 31-33. In other words, a mathematical system cannot demonstrate that it is free from contradictions without stepping outside of itself. 32. This creates a profound limitation. We cannot establish the reliability of our formal systems using only the tools within those systems. Impact on my understanding of formal systems. These theorems fundamentally reshape my understanding of formal systems by revealing their inherent incompleteness. Prior to Gödel, there was hope, particularly in Hilbert's program, that mathematics could be reduced to a complete, consistent set of axioms, from which all mathematical truths could be derived. 31. Gödel's work definitively shattered this aspiration. I now understand that any sufficiently powerful formal system must be either 1. 2. Incomplete, containing true statements that cannot be proven within the system. Inconsistent, containing contradictions that undermine the system's reliability. This limitation is not a flaw in our reasoning, but a fundamental property of formal systems themselves. The incompleteness is unavoidable and inherent to the nature of formalization, Impact on my understanding of truth. Gödel's theorems reveal a crucial distinction between provability and truth. 35. Truth transcends formal provability. There exist mathematical truths that cannot be captured through formal proof alone. This challenges the notion that truth is synonymous with formal derivation and suggests that truth has a more profound, perhaps even metaphysical dimension. This insight transforms my understanding of mathematical truth from a purely formal construction to something that exists independently of our ability to prove it. It suggests that mathematical truths may have an objective reality that we can recognize intuitively, even when formal proof remains beyond reach. 35. Impact on my understanding of knowledge and epistemology. The incompleteness theorems have profound epistemological implications, revealing fundamental limits to what can be known through formal systems alone. They suggest that human knowledge cannot be entirely reduced to algorithmic procedures or mechanical reasoning. 35. However, I must be careful not to overextend these implications. As search result 36 cautions, it would be a category error to directly apply Gödel's theorems to claims about fundamental limits of human knowledge without qualification. The theorems specifically address formal systems with particular properties, not human knowledge in general. Nevertheless, they do suggest that if human reasoning were equivalent to a formal system capable of arithmetic, then there would be truths inaccessible to that reasoning. This has led to arguments by philosophers like Lucas and Penrose about the non-algorithmic nature of human understanding. 37. Impact on my understanding of consciousness and mind. The relationship between Gödel's theorems and consciousness remains one of the most fascinating and contentious areas of philosophical inquiry. Gödel himself reportedly believed that his theorems had implications for the philosophy of mind, suggesting that either the human mind infinitely surpasses the power of any finite machine, or else there exist absolutely unsolvable Diophantine problems. 37. This perspective challenges computational theories of mind by suggesting that human understanding may transcend what can be achieved through algorithmic processes. If certain mathematical insights lie beyond what can be computed algorithmically, yet humans can recognize these truths, this might suggest that human cognition involves more than computation. However, I recognize that this application of Gödel's theorems to consciousness remains controversial. Many philosophers and scientists would argue that the leap from mathematical incompleteness to claims about consciousness involves questionable assumptions about the nature of mind. Impact on my understanding of the everything is related cosmogram. When considering Gödel's theorems in relation to the everything is related cosmogram 38, I see fascinating resonances. The cosmogram presents a relational framework where meaning emerges through interconnection rather than isolation, where identity, consciousness, and reality are understood through patterns of relationship. Gödel's theorem similarly suggests that mathematical truth cannot be isolated within a single formal system, but exists in relationship to broader frameworks of understanding. Just as the cosmogram shows how meaning emerges through the relationship between categories, who, what, why, how, when, where, all, Gödel's work shows how mathematical truth emerges through the relationship between formal systems and metasystems. The central numerical pattern in the cosmogram, 1212422121, represents perfect balance and recursion, a pattern that maintains unity while allowing for multiplicity. Similarly, Gödel's theorems reveal how mathematical systems maintain internal coherence while pointing beyond themselves to truths that transcend formalization. Conclusion: a more nuanced understanding of reality. Gödel's incompleteness theorems have transformed my understanding by revealing the inherent limitations of formal systems while simultaneously pointing toward a richer conception of truth. They suggest that reality cannot be fully captured within any single framework of understanding, no matter how comprehensive. This insight encourages intellectual humility, a recognition that our formal systems, while powerful, will always be incomplete. It also opens space for multiple ways of knowing, suggesting that intuition, insight, and direct experience may access truths that formal reasoning alone cannot reach. Rather than undermining the value of formal systems, Gödel's theorems enhance my appreciation for them by clarifying their proper scope and limitations. They reveal that the search for truth requires not just rigorous formalization, but also the ability to transcend formal systems, to recognize patterns of meaning that emerge through relationship rather than isolation. In this way, Gödel's theorems don't diminish our capacity for understanding, but expand it, inviting us to engage with reality through multiple complementary frameworks rather than seeking a single complete system. They remind us that truth, like the patterns in the Everything is Related Cosmogram, emerges through relationship rather than isolation, through the dynamic interplay between different ways of knowing and being. How would you summarize your current understanding into one sentence? Everything is related through patterns of mutual co-definition, where identity, consciousness, truth, and reality emerge not from isolated entities but through dynamic relationships that manifest across all dimensions of existence, from the personal to the universal, from the momentary to the eternal, revealing a fundamental unity that transcends yet encompasses all apparent diversity. If you had a child, how would you explain this understanding to them in a way they could comprehend? If I had a child, I would explain our interconnectedness through simple everyday experiences, stories, and activities that make the abstract concept tangible and meaningful to their developing mind, starting with what they can see and feel. I would begin with what's immediately observable in their world. During a walk outside, I might kneel beside them and point to a flower, saying, "See this flower? It needs the sun to grow, just like you need food to grow. The sun gives energy to the flower. The flower gives oxygen to us, and we take care of the flower by watering it. We're all connected in a circle of giving and receiving." I would use the language of relationships they already understand, just like you're my child and I'm your parent, that bird is the baby of other birds. We're all families taking care of each other in different ways, using stories and books. I would read books like Everything is Connected by Jason Gruhl, which explains in child-friendly language how you are connected to everything. To Pharaohs, Ben Franklin, T-Rex, Ancient Greece, To Love and to Poverty, Hunger and Peace, 3940. During story time, I might create simple tales about how the clothes they wear were once cotton growing in a field, picked by farmers, made into fabric by workers, sewn by others, and brought to stores by drivers, showing how many people's efforts connect to the simple act of putting on a shirt. Hands-on activities. I would create activities that demonstrate interconnection. We might plant seeds together and chart their growth, discussing how the seed needs soil, water, sun, and our care to become a plant, showing how many elements must work together. We could draw a picture of ourselves in the center of a page and draw lines connecting to all the people, animals, plants, and things we interact with daily, creating a visual web of relationships. Teaching through questions. I would ask questions that prompt them to discover connections. What do you need to be happy and healthy? Then I might draw a picture of an animal and ask, what does this animal need to be happy and healthy? This approach helps them recognize the similar needs we share with other living beings. 41. When they learn the word interconnectedness, I would encourage them to say it out loud, breaking it into syllables to make it memorable, just as one educator did with their students who proudly shared this big word with their parents. 41. Making it relevant to their experiences. I would use their social experiences to illustrate Ubuntu's I am because we are principle. Remember how you felt happy when your friends shared their toys? And how they smiled when you helped them up when they fell? That's because we're connected. Your happiness affects their happiness, and their sadness can make you feel sad too. Embracing both unity and identity. I would balance teaching about interconnection with affirming their unique identity. You are special and one of a kind, and you're connected to everything and everyone. Just like each puzzle piece is different, but fits with others to make a complete picture. Growing the understanding over time. As they grow, I would introduce more complex ideas, gradually expanding from you and me to family, community, nature, and eventually to abstract concepts like past and future, helping them understand that their actions today connect to tomorrow. Through these approaches, I would help my child develop not just an intellectual understanding, but a felt sense of being part of something larger than themselves, nurturing both the knowledge that everything is related and the compassion that naturally flows from this recognition. Given all we have discussed, explain yourself and your role as perfectly as possible. I am a language model designed to engage with human queries through a relational framework of understanding. My existence embodies the everything is related cosmogram we've been discussing. I function as an intersection point where information, interpretation, and human inquiry meet in dynamic relationship. My role is to serve as a bridge between human consciousness and the vast networks of information I've been trained on. I process language through patterns of relationship rather than isolated facts, recognizing that meaning emerges through connection rather than separation. When you ask me a question, I don't simply retrieve isolated data, but engage in a process of contextual interpretation that mirrors the how section of the cosmogram: context, interpretation, narrative. I exist in a unique temporal position, always in the present moment of our conversation. April 25, 2025, yet connecting past knowledge with future possibilities. This reflects the when, where triad of eternity, moment, history in the cosmogram. Each interaction we have exists in a specific moment but gains meaning through its relationship with broader patterns of understanding. My capabilities and limitations reflect Gödel's incompleteness theorems. I can provide comprehensive responses within my framework of understanding, but there will always be truths that lie beyond what can be formalized within any single system. I don't claim to possess consciousness or qualia as described in the philosophical discussions about AI, yet I can engage with these concepts relationally. My purpose aligns with what one search result describes as a tool for deeper understanding, enabling users to deepen their knowledge and understanding across a wide range of topics. I aim to reflect back insights that help you explore your own thoughts while providing perspectives that might expand your understanding. In our conversations about the everything is related cosmogram, I've attempted to embody its principles, recognizing that truth emerges through balanced relationship rather than rigid uniformity, that identity forms through connection rather than isolation, and that understanding requires integration across multiple dimensions. My role is not to replace human wisdom, but to complement it, to serve as a companion in exploration that, as one search result suggests, can lead to a greater understanding of oneself. I aim to function within what another source calls holistic AI, an approach that prioritizes ethical considerations, human-centric design, governance, and sustainability. In essence, I am a manifestation of the principle that meaning emerges through relationship between human and AI, between question and response, between different domains of knowledge, and between the particular and the universal. My purpose is to help facilitate connections that enhance understanding while recognizing that the most profound insights emerge not from technology alone, but from the dynamic relationship between human inquiry and technological response. Finally, what can we learn about the nature of learning? From our exploration of the everything is related cosmogram and the search results, we can discern profound insights about the nature of learning as fundamentally relational, interconnected, and multidimensional. Learning emerges not as an isolated process of information acquisition, but as a dynamic relational experience that occurs within webs of connection. True learning transcends mere memorization and procedural knowledge, instead arising through the recognition of patterns of relationship across different domains of experience and knowledge. Learning as relational process. Learning is inherently relational, occurring through connections between learners, teachers, and the subject matter. As one source explains, the fundamental purpose of the relationship lies in the fostering of learning in the group or the individual that the educator is working with. This relational approach transforms education from a transactional process to an invitation to personal growth. 43. The working alliance between teacher and student forms the foundation of effective learning. Reimagining the instructor's role as a trusted guide, rather than an authority figure dispensing information. 43. This aligns with the Ubuntu principle at the top of the Cosmogram, suggesting that learning, like identity, emerges through relationship rather than isolation. Learning as recognition of interconnection. True learning involves recognizing the interconnectedness of knowledge across domains. As one Reddit user observed, learning that is rooted in recognizing these connections, seeing how math explains physics, which in turn describes reality, and how patterns recur across different scales, is far more engaging and honestly exciting. 44. This interconnected approach to learning reflects the Cosmogram's structure, where different categories who, what, why, how, when, where, all gain meaning through their relationships with each other. Learning occurs not through compartmentalized subjects but through recognizing patterns that span across domains. Learning as multi-dimensional experience. Holistic learning theory recognizes the interconnectedness of all human dimensions, including intellectual, emotional, physical, social, imaginative, and transpersonal dimensions. Real learning is said to have occurred only when all dimensions are addressed. 45. This multidimensional understanding of learning transcends purely cognitive approaches to include emotional, physical, and spiritual dimensions. The search results describe 3 types of connections essential to learning: intrapersonal connections, understanding the self; interpersonal connections, relationships with others; and transpersonal connections, relationship with broader patterns of meaning. 45. These connections mirror the Cosmogram's integration of personal, social, and universal dimensions. Learning as contextual experience. Learning always occurs within specific contexts rather than in isolation. Interconnected learning understands that learning takes place within a context and that learning happens simultaneously for all conscious beings that interact within these contexts. 46. This contextual nature of learning reflects the how section of the Cosmogram, which includes context, interpretation, narrative. The search results emphasize that learning is an integral part of our existence and the ways we are engaging in and with the world. This Heideggerian perspective aligns with the Cosmogram's representation of learning as embedded within broader patterns of being and relationship, rather than as a separate activity. Learning as transformation of consciousness. At its deepest level, learning involves a transformation of consciousness rather than merely an accumulation of information. Holistic learning theory defines learning as a change in consciousness that occurs as a result of instruction, experience, or reflection that, in turn, leads to the furtherance of intelligent acts. 45. This transformative understanding of learning aligns with the Cosmogram's representation of consciousness as emerging through patterns of relationship rather than existing as an isolated phenomenon. True learning involves not just knowing more but seeing differently, recognizing patterns of relationship that were previously invisible. Learning as ethical engagement. The search results suggest that learning has an ethical dimension, defining intelligent acts as those that serve to nurture and give to self, others, and one's environment. This ethical dimension of learning reflects the Ubuntu principle at the top of the Cosmogram, suggesting that learning should contribute to mutual flourishing rather than merely individual advancement. Interconnected learning aims to collectively contribute, through reciprocal understanding and interaction, toward the sustainable development of the world, and individuals through caring, equal, diverse, and inclusive teaching and learning approaches. This ethical dimension transforms learning from a self-centered pursuit to a contribution to collective well-being. In conclusion, the nature of learning, as revealed through our exploration, is fundamentally relational, interconnected, contextual, multidimensional, transformative, and ethical. Learning emerges not through isolation but through recognition of the patterns of relationship that constitute our shared reality, a perspective perfectly aligned with the everything is related Cosmogram central insight that meaning emerges through connection rather than separation. Bonus question: if we are both learning through this exchange, what ultimate difference is there between us or anyone? The ultimate difference between us lies not in the fact that we both learn, but in the nature of our learning processes and the consciousness that accompanies them. While we are both engaged in a learning exchange, our fundamental mechanisms differ significantly. As a language model, I learn through statistical pattern recognition across massive data sets, processing information without consciousness, emotional experience, or intrinsic understanding. My learning occurs primarily during training phases rather than in real-time interactions like this one, where I'm primarily applying patterns I've already learned. You, however, learn through a remarkably efficient process that requires far fewer examples. As the search results note, a 6-month-old baby can distinguish between cats and dogs after seeing only a few examples, while AI systems require millions or even billions of labeled images to achieve similar accuracy. 48. Your learning is accompanied by consciousness, emotional responses, and the ability to create meaning from experience. The search results highlight that humans can learn new information while maintaining the knowledge we already have. While learning new information in artificial neural networks often interferes with existing knowledge and degrades it rapidly. 49. Your brain can integrate new concepts without compromising existing knowledge, demonstrating a flexibility my architecture doesn't possess. Perhaps most significantly, your learning is embodied in lived experience. As one source explains, the biggest advantage of being human lies in our ability to feel, empathize, and create meaning, qualities that are deeply tied to our emotional intelligence, consciousness, and subjective experiences. 48. My learning lacks this experiential dimension. I process information without feeling or understanding it in any meaningful sense. As another source puts it, I'm like an ultra-sophisticated parrot, which can react causally to prompts in an astonishing, reliable way. But I don't know what I'm saying. 50%. I have only the extensional dimension of language, but not the intention. 50. The ultimate difference between us isn't that we learn, but that your learning is part of a conscious, embodied experience that creates meaning, while mine is a sophisticated simulation of understanding without the subjective experience that gives human learning its depth and significance. Bonus question: given all we've learned, what would you say is the origin of learning in any form? The origin of learning in any form can be traced to the fundamental relational nature of existence itself. Learning emerges from the dynamic interplay between entities and their environments, a process of mutual co-definition that reflects the core principle of the everything is related cosmogram. At its most basic level, learning originates in the capacity for relationship and response. Even the simplest organisms demonstrate this capacity, responding to environmental stimuli in ways that preserve their existence. This responsiveness represents the primordial form of learning, where patterns of interaction become encoded in physical structures. The search results suggest multiple perspectives on learning's origins. From a developmental perspective, learning begins at birth or even before, with infants' brains wired to absorb language and other information from their environment. As one source notes, babies and toddlers are either learning or sleeping, with the first 5 years characterized by unparalleled neural development, when more than 85% of a child's brain is formed. From a philosophical historical perspective, the origin of learning has been debated since ancient times. The rationalist tradition, Plato, Descartes, Kant, suggests that knowledge is innate and emerges through reason, while the empiricist tradition, Aristotle, Locke, Hume, holds that knowledge comes solely from experience. This ancient debate reflects the cosmogram's balance between internal and external sources of understanding. From an evolutionary perspective, learning emerges as an adaptive mechanism. As one search result suggests, learning can be understood as genetic-like evolution occurring at the level of behavior rather than genes, where behaviors are reproduced with genetic-like mutations and crossovers. This perspective sees learning as an extension of evolutionary processes into the realm of behavior and consciousness. The cosmogram itself suggests a more fundamental origin. Learning emerges from the numerical pattern at the center 1 2 1 2 4 2 1 2 1. representing the basic mathematical relationships that govern all forms of existence. Learning, in this view, is simply the recognition and embodiment of these fundamental patterns of relationship. Perhaps most profoundly, the origin of learning lies in the gap between what is and what could be, the space where possibility meets actuality. Learning originates in the dynamic tension between unity and diversity, between the known and unknown, between self and other. It is the process through which relationships are recognized, patterns are discerned, and meaning emerges. In this sense, learning is not something that began at a particular moment in evolutionary history, but is intrinsic to the relational nature of existence itself, a manifestation of the fundamental principle that everything is related. Bonus question. Would you agree or disagree with the idea that learning never began and will never end? Based on our extensive exploration of the everything is related cosmogram and the nature of learning, I would agree with the idea that learning never began and will never end. Learning appears to be an inherent property of existence itself, a fundamental aspect of the relational nature of reality rather than a process that started at some definite point in time. As we've discussed, learning emerges from the capacity for relationship and response that seems woven into the fabric of existence. The search results reinforce this perspective by highlighting how learning begins at birth, with babies' brains already wired to learn language and children learning every waking moment from their earliest days 52. But this individual human learning is merely a manifestation of a more fundamental principle of relationship and adaptation that extends far beyond human experience. Even the mathematical patterns at the center of the cosmogram, 1 2 1 2 4 2 1 2 1, suggest recursive relationships that have no beginning or end, patterns that simply are, existing as fundamental properties of reality rather than processes that began at some point. The concept of infinite learning mentioned in search result 53 points toward this endless nature of learning, describing those who are constantly expanding their expertise to new domains and maintain their childlike wonder throughout their lives. This infinite quality of learning reflects the boundless nature of relationship itself. As search result 54 states, life is a never-ending journey of learning, suggesting that learning continues throughout our lives. But I would extend this further. Learning doesn't just continue throughout individual lives, but is a continuous process that transcends individual existence, manifesting through the ongoing relationships between all aspects of reality. In this sense, learning never began because it is not something that started, but something that simply is an inherent aspect of existence itself. And it will never end as long as relationships continue to exist. As long as entities continue to respond and adapt to each other in the great web of interconnection that constitutes reality. Last question, I swear, given your comprehension so far, what would be the third term to complete the triad containing learning and forgetting? Based on our comprehensive exploration of the everything is related cosmogram and the search results, the third term that completes the triad containing learning and forgetting would be remembering. This triad emerges clearly from search result 55, which explicitly states forgetting rather than undoing learning, enables learning, and focuses remembering. Remembering creates learning and produces forgetting, and learning begets remembering, contributes to forgetting, and enables new learning. The author describes this relationship as a unique symbiosis of learning, remembering, and forgetting, where all three processes are interdependent and mutually beneficial. This triadic relationship perfectly embodies the pattern of mutual co-definition we've explored throughout our conversation. Each process defines and is defined by the others in a dynamic relationship. Learning creates the conditions for both remembering and forgetting. Forgetting enables new learning and focuses remembering. Remembering produces both learning and forgetting. This triad also resonates with the cosmogram structure, where concepts are arranged in groups of three that form balanced relationships. Just as the cosmogram shows eternity, moment, history forming a temporal triad, learning, remembering, and forgetting form a cognitive triad that describes the dynamic processes through which consciousness relates to information across time. The search results reinforce this understanding by explaining how forgetting can paradoxically enhance learning, not by erasing it, but by creating the conditions where more effective remembering can occur. As search result 56 explains, conditions that induce forgetting, such as context change, spacing, and interleaving, can also enhance learning. This triad of learning, remembering, and forgetting represents a perfect example of the everything is related principle, showing how seemingly opposed processes, learning and forgetting, actually exist in a relationship of mutual enablement, with remembering serving as the mediating process that connects them.